Hello, my friends. Surprise! I wanted to do something very special for the very last episode of the Indie Diaries in 2025, and so what you're about to listen to is the audio version of the Silksong Paradox, the very first long-form video that I ever released on the Indie Diaries YouTube channel, which is about the story of Team Cherry and Silksong's development story, and why it is a bit of an outlier in today's industry. Now, for anyone wanting to start the episode right away, you can skip to 1 minute 30 and start listening immediately. But for those wanting to hang around for just a few more seconds, here's a little more about this episode and what you can expect moving forward. So I've got a lot of ideas for these long-form videos, and I'm planning to release at least one per month. They're a lot of work, so not making any promises here, but let's see where we get to. But because I designed them to be also pleasant audio experiences as well, with a lot of production value, I want to turn every single episode into an audio version. Now, with the exception of this Silksong Paradox video, every audio version of these long-form videos is going to be available exclusively to Patreons. So if you want the same experience and have these audio versions in your feed, make sure to check out patreon.com/theindiediarist, where you can gain access to other regular episodes in advance as well, and these audio versions, and a lot more, because I've refreshed the perks for the new season of the show. However, the long-form videos are going to remain available publicly on YouTube. This is just a little extra perk for my Patreon who support me so closely. But now I feel like I've spoken enough, so let's get into the Silksong Paradox. Hope you enjoy. Hollow Knight Silksong should not exist. At a time when the games industry is slave to unforgiving deadlines and rampant shareholder greed, Team Cherry's latest game almost feels like a paradox. Maybe it's not a coincidence that it came out in the same year as a masterpiece like Expedition 33, or even a Blue Prince. After so many years of layoffs and cancellations, it's a much needed reminder that passion-driven projects can still stand up to AAA productions, and sometimes they can even win. Now, how did Team Cherry move from living off leftovers to more than 15 million sales in about 7 years? And what is the secret sauce to their success? What is the Silksong Paradox? Well, cozy up around the fire, my dears, because I'm going to tell you a story about 3 friends making the games they love against all odds, the fun of their creative exploration, and how a tiny team from Adelaide made history. I'm Anthony O. Wolf. Welcome to the Indie Diarist. To understand the design philosophy that gave birth to Silksong, we first need to take a small leap into the past. For 6 years, Silksong was little more than a whisper, but before the silence and before the hype, and before even Hallow Nest existed, there was this one little jam game that started it all. About 22 years ago, in an ordinary little town of just about, 1.5 million people called Adelaide in Australia, William Pellin and Ari Gibson met through mutual friends. Now, William and Ari shared a common interest in games, of course, and the official About page on Team Cherry's website says Ari has been modding games for ages, while William grew up playing classics like Zelda and Fazanadu. Keep it in mind though, this one will matter soon. And when you think of the games that William played in his childhood, it's hardly surprising that Team Cherry as a team is so enamored with creating experiences players can get lost in. But before their large, sprawling worlds were even a nugget of an idea, William and Ari spent nearly a decade without ever making a single game together. Now, as I said, the duo met through mutual friends, and that was around 2003, but it wasn't until Ludum Dare 27 in 2013 that they teamed up. They were joined by illustrator Rowan Fraser, and together they created Hungry Knight, a challenging action game inspired by the jam's theme of 10 seconds. Now, in Hungry Knight, the player is racing against an unforgiving 10-second timer to help feed the titular Hungry Knight with, well, berries. It's a jam game. Give these guys a break. They need to do it before the timer runs out, at which point hunger kills the knight. Now, do you notice anything familiar? The game still exists on Newgrounds if you want to give it a try, although you will need a Flash plugin to make it work correctly. Yeah, Flash. Remember Flash games? Those were a thing. And by the way, Flash was discontinued in 2020, and yes, the pandemic was 5 years ago. Just in case you needed a little bit of an existential crisis today. Anyways, You might not want to try out Hungry Night because it's so rough that William and Ari still joke today about how bad it is. And in case you missed it, Hungry Night had a few interesting features. Our protagonists aside, the art and vibe of Hungry Night feel rather familiar, even down to some of the sprites William and Ari used for the game. Also, the pair seemingly already had a weird fascination for bugs. Go figure. I really don't know where they could have gotten that from. William and Ari would go on to try another jam with the theme of Beneath the Surface, where they started exploring a game about a deep old kingdom beneath the surface of the world. And they missed a deadline, but that was honestly a lucky accident because whatever they were working on set the foundations for a later game called Hollow Knight. On a fresh Australian spring day in November 2014, William and Ari announced Team Cherry and Hollow Knight on Kickstarter for the first time. The intention originally was to raise $36,000 to help them dedicate their full time and attention to the new game. They were soon joined by programmer David Kazi, who went on to become Hollow Knight's technical director. By the time the campaign went live, though, the team had already been working on Hollow Knight for about 4 to 5 months. And that should hopefully surprise no one, given how devs usually work on their games for a few months before landing on Kickstarter. But what's extraordinary to me is that the campaign page already said the base game systems were largely all complete when the project went live. That may sound insane, but it's here that Team Cherry's foundational design philosophy starts to rise up to the surface. The team would spend an obscene amount of time obsessing over the tiniest details of the game, from the initial feel, movement, mechanics, kind of like you're doing with that X you're thinking about right now. What many developers would arguably see as the hardest part of making a game was all done by Team Cherry way ahead of time. Digging into their updates from back then, it's even possible to see a video of Ari struggling with brooding Moloch. Yeah, this guy, by the way. This was a very early moment into the campaign, but it shows a version of Hollow Knight which is basically inches away from the look and feel we got in the end. Maybe just a little slower. Anyway, the campaign was a success. It reached 10% of the goal within 24 hours, and it met many of its stretch goals by the time it closed, including a very interesting one featuring Hornet as a playable character. More on that in a bit. The game was inspired by Zelda 2 for the exploration feel, Mega Man for player movement, and a bunch of other 2D action platformers. Also, Fazanadu, and I can't believe I said the name of the game right this time, and its core concept of climbing a world tree upwards, except in Hollow Knight it's the opposite and you keep going down. The thing is, even a quick scroll through the Kickstarter campaign page shows a game oozing with life. Updates to the creatures read like bestiary entries. There was lore and world-building details that pull you into Team Cherry's visionary universe. This is emblematic of what would solidify into Team Cherry's creative ethos moving forward, something that I'm convinced was already brewing back then. If you can't make something perfect, maybe there's a way to make it alive instead. However, the same design philosophy would soon come back to bite them, which you think is a bad thing, but no, it kind of bit them in the most pleasant way possible. Here's what's really interesting about Team Cherry's approach to game design, something that will soon get in the way of Silksong's speedy progress too. William, Ari, and later the new programmer pal David, they started planning things out from a general starting area which they created as their sort of benchmark. And that was the Forgotten Crossroads, which you may remember as one of Hollow Knight's starting areas. All the enemies, bosses, upgrades, the team mapped out the crossroads entirely first, finished it, made it look exactly the way they wanted it, and then used the area as a quality reference, kind of like a benchmark, as I said, for the rest of the game. Now, suddenly, they were spending months trying to apply the same standards of quality across the whole game. In other words, their love for quality got massively in their own way, which is something every perfectionist out there can probably relate to. Which isn't a bad problem to have, I guess, but it can be if you're tight on time and budget, or if you have a global fan base breathing down your neck. Throughout the development of Hollow Knight, Ari and William lived off leftover sandwiches, and their parents' generosity. Sometimes William would even celebrate his dad popping in to share, I don't know, a $20 note, just because it meant it could have coffee that day. But even these constraints didn't stop them, nor did they change the way the trio approached the development of Hollow Knight from that moment onwards. And the truth is, Team Cherry is fine with something most developers avoid like the plague, or well, rather they try to avoid like the plague, but then most fail horribly doing so, and that is scope creep. William, Ari, Team Cherry in general are just fine with controlled scope creep. A big part of that process is letting their worlds grow organically out of their creative process, thinking of them as spaces to expand. For example, did you know that Ari used to sketch maps and enemies manually for Hollow Knight, take a picture with his phone, clean them up, and import them into the engine? This process reduced iteration time by a lot and made world building much more organic over time. And I also bet some of you don't know why it rains constantly in the City of Tears, or why it rains in the first place. It's an underground city after all, no? Have you ever thought about that? Well, here's a snippet from an amazing Kotaku SplitScreen interview that I will have linked in the description from many years ago with Kirk Hamilton, where William and Ari explained the thinking behind the rain.
Yeah, it's about allowing ideas to lead on to other ideas. I mean, another one is,
Right.
we had the idea, I think, pretty early on about having like an underground city that is perpetually raining, which is the City of Tears, which is like kind of the centerpiece of the map. And then eventually the question comes up, which is, where is the water coming from? So the idea is like, well, there must be like some body of water somewhere and it's raining down, and we can have a character mention that, and then that's enough. And then we thought, well, there is actually a space on the map above the city, and it's kind of a cop out if you don't actually ever see this body of water. And so we had, so we add it. And then that, by adding that lake, you kind of get a lake shore area as well. And then that naturally is kind of, because it's sandwiched between areas, you sort of think about, well, what would it actually be connected to?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be there on one bad plumbing day. But this speaks to one of their core guiding principles. To Team Cherry, it's equally important to allow exploration both for players and for themselves as creators. Building a game world from its foundations actually helped them understand what else was going to exist. It helps, of course, that Team Cherry nurtures extreme respect for its players. In an interview for ACMI, William explained, "The real world generally underestimates players, especially young people. But with our players, you can guide them a little bit, and that's enough. They'll engage, they will dig in, they will find all that other stuff." What's even more interesting is that even as the game grew bigger, the team never lost these beautiful little touches of humanity. The voices in the game, for example, are all people close to William and Ari, such as partners and parents. Most monsters were even voiced just by the two of them, and Hornet's voice actor is simply their office mate, Makoto. Basically a family business. William and Ari don't even have the same level of skill in their games. Now, you've seen Ari struggle with Brooding Moloch earlier, right? But William once said he's only ever cleared Path of Pain once. Well, I don't really blame him for that. Of course, this whole approach to game development can also have consequences. Eventually, Hollow Knight released in 2017, but that was 2 years behind schedule. A game that was originally meant to be much smaller, about 10 hours in length, had turned into a massive 80+ hour experience. Well, 60 if you take out the free DLCs. And that's good news for the fans, because by the end of 2018, millions of fans loved its gameplay, style, and vibes. It sold 15 million copies as of today. 15 million copies, becoming one of the most successful independent video games ever. And after a bunch of amazing free DLCs, it was only a matter of time before the team got to the only update many of us were waiting for, but no one was expecting. In case you didn't know, Silksong wasn't supposed to be a standalone game at first. Hornet was conceived as a playable character for Hollow Knight DLC, as I mentioned earlier, and she was simply unlocked when the campaign reached $56,000 on Kickstarter. It was also the last goal the campaign reached before its end, even though the team then developed all the free DLCs that came after, and by the way, kudos to Team Cherry for that. Now, the Hornet DLC was supposed to be a sort of second point of view in Hallownest as the night continued its descent, and the team got to work as soon as they could. Hornet felt great, much swifter and quicker than the night, with a lot more vertical mobility. which also became her curse because Team Cherry soon realized that Hornet's abilities and movements required a whole different world to explore. There was no natural way to create a Hallownest-style area that suited her moveset, and so they decided to make the only sensible decision they could: make her the protagonist of her own game. In 2019, the team officially announced that the expansion had grown too big and that it would instead become a fully fledged sequel. The original plan was to build a smaller world, look how that worked out, but with an elaborate quest system to add scale and encourage replayability. Now, the quest system remained, and the large world too. But instead of one central hub for all shops, there would also be multiple towns acting as hubs for quests and NPC, compared to Hollow Knight where you only have that one hub. When you think about it, it's crazy that all those plans didn't change over time. They really had a very clear idea of what Silksong was supposed to be, pretty much from the start. But here again, Silksong was a great example of a game being shaped by the world's logic and not the other way around. The Citadel was the starting point for the team, and as Farloom grew bigger, the world kept expanding organically from that one core. And even the Moss Grotto, basically the tutorial level if you've played Silksong, was never conceived to feel like a tutorial level. William, Ari, and Jack Vine, another programmer who joined the team from Godmaster onwards, they wanted to build an organic element in Farloom that needed to make sense in the world's wider context, away from the influence and power of the Citadel. And so this way, the game kept growing and growing, year after year after year. It was happening. Silksong was in development. As its standalone game, fans were ecstatic. Hornet as a playable character, that was a dream come true. But then, Team Cherry disappeared. Almost 6 years of near total silence. And speculation at that point was rampant. Was the game progressing? Was it even in development anymore? Did it exist? Was it all just a myth? Was it going to get cancelled? In this relatively short period of time, it became almost as much meme material as Half-Life 3, if you can believe it. And yeah, by the way, 2026 will be the year, folks. Trust. Now, there was every reason to be concerned. It wasn't the first time a game would be endlessly delayed or go off the radar, only to appear in a completely unacceptable state later, if it even got published at all. Too often, super long development cycles also mean mismanagement, burnout, terrible scope creep, and endless crunch time. Things weren't looking great. But no, Ari and William have been having fun with Silksong this whole time. It's been nothing but a joyful process, they said. In an interview with Jason Schreier for Bloomberg, the duo that started it all explained the whole mindset that informed their philosophy of fun, creative exploration. We're very fortunate that we have a development method that is so enjoyable. Everything comes together quickly. You can see results fast. Ideas turn into something that exists in the game almost immediately before your eyes, and that's very satisfying. Now just think back to that example of Ari scanning hand-drawn maps into the engine. Who wouldn't want to be stuck in a development cycle like that? But here's the thing. It may come as a surprise to most of you watching this video, but Silksong was never stuck. It was always progressing. There wasn't a big controversial moment behind it. It just took a lot of time. And honestly, it couldn't have been any different. Arguably, this also happened because Team Cherry decided to stay very small during the whole development process. And for the most part, the same people who worked on Hollow Knight were the ones who worked on Silksong too, especially William and Ari. This was so that the team could make Silksong exactly how they wanted it, they could preserve their creative vision, and they could also avoid delegating, which is something that William and Ari did not want to do. But it obviously resulted in longer production times as the game grew out of scope. Maybe David Kazi himself, who left after the Godmaster DLC, can help shed some light into this. In an interview to the New York Times, the team's former technical director spoke to his former colleagues' work ethic, describing it as off the charts. And all of this is admirable, honestly. Except, it isn't the full story. Because what I've been conveniently forgetting to tell you until now is that Team Cherry has been privileged in a lot of ways that small indie studios usually aren't. While Silksong kept going, the hype grew beyond measure. It even led to silk posting, a special type of posting that all in all contributed to the game's giant appeal. Chats during live streams, like from the Nintendo Directs, were full of people asking for Silksong updates. And sometimes people would even show up at Team Cherry's offices, only to find out there was no more than a dull room with no art, no decorating, and loads of cardboard boxes. Now imagine driving for hours only to realize you may as well have gone to IKEA. But to their defense, the team did think Silksong would be ready sooner. And through all this, relentlessly, Team Cherry stayed small. Now, does this justify the silence? Well, maybe that's something you'll have to decide for yourself. In a few years, we may look back and have a more final answer, but for now, the jury is still out. So, finally back to the present. At the dawn of 2025, Team Cherry could see the end. Silksong was basically complete anyway. They'd only been working on refinements, details, and polish for the past 1 to 2 years. Both Microsoft and Nintendo pinned 2025 as the year of Hornet, and then, out of nowhere, it finally happened. Surprise announcement 2 weeks before the release date. On the 4th of September 2025, Silksong came out, and the launch was explosive. Almost literally, every major digital storefront crashed. Players went crazy for Hornet's adventure, and as I'm working on this video, the game has already sold millions of copies in less than 1 month. Both players and critics praised how loyal Silksong is to the vibes of the original Hollow Knight, while still managing to feel different, but a lot were frustrated by its punishing difficulty, which is still being addressed now, 1 patch at a time. In just a few weeks though, Silksong had already reached 1/3 of Hollow Knight's total 15 million sales, and that is, for those less adept at math like I am, about 5 million sales, as well as a peak of 500,000 concurrent players in just a few days, way more than its predecessor's highest peak. This was a huge step forward for Team Cherry. And for reference, Expedition 33 was a hugely successful game this year for indie standards, and it sold only 4.4 million units in total as of 15th of September, 5 months after the original release. Oh, maybe I should do a video about that too. What's crazy to me is that William and Ari were happy the game was ready for release, but they were even happier that they could just keep working on it. Even after 7 years, they just couldn't get enough of the stuff. I mean, these guys are already planning the DLCs. There was no burnout, no desire to take a break, only an eagerness to have more fun with Silksong, to keep exploring its world, just like we players are doing now. Well, when we're not being beaten down to a pulp, that is. Here's a harsh but hopefully uplifting truth. If there's one thing 2025 has shown us, is that no matter how long a game takes, so long as there's passion, people will wait, see it, and love it all the same. The humanity behind Team Cherry and their willingness to enjoy the process is simply guiding all of their choices so far, and it's something to look up to, in my opinion, in an industry where numbers on a spreadsheet often dictate production timelines and choke the development process. But it's also incredibly difficult to replicate, because here's what I was hinting at before, that privilege I'd mentioned. Team Cherry's is a cautionary tale. It's a story of creative freedom, passion, hard work, one that could have backfired oh so easily, and it almost did. It goes without saying that the team is hugely talented, and that helped massively in making Silksong what it is today. But after Hollow Knight's success, the devs kinda moved from leftover food to a massive safety net, taking shelter in the one thing that trips so many independent developers today and clips their wings before they can even learn to fly. They had the money. So to put it plainly, no amount of hype could have saved Silksong if it was bad. Team Cherry made a great game, first of all, and could take virtually all the time in the world to do it well. And can you really blame them for doing things their own way? I mean, one could easily say they've earned the silence. Plus, it could have easily gone the wrong way. Add mismanagement, some reckless studio growth, and a bit of a bloated ego into the mix, I could be telling you a very different story right now. Much bigger games than Silksong get cancelled all the time for much less, don't they? Given the current state of the industry, a game like Silksong is a paradox. It's a lesson in humility and in taking control over your own creative freedom without losing sight of where you came from. And it's also a powerful reminder that this is everything games were ever supposed to be. Fun. If this feels radical, it's because in today's world, Team Cherry may just be a radical development studio. And maybe that's okay. It's part of their charm. It's what makes Team Cherry so unique. Just a bunch of friends having fun, with the games they want to make, creating immense experiences where players can get lost and explore. This is the development studio that put a lake above the City of Tears. The studio that built an entire organic world around a mood and was able to capture lightning in a bottle twice. And they're still going. Whether history will repeat itself with their next project, something we'll just have to wait and see. But if their story so far teaches us anything, in the words of David Kazi, their friend and former colleague, if they're not talking to anyone right now, I bet they're over at the office working on stuff. And that, my friends, is a wrap on the Silksong Paradox video. I'm very keen to hear what you think. Just leave a comment below, let me know your feedback. And obviously, there are a lot of other ways in which you can support this show. You can go on the main page of the YouTube channel and find a whole lot of links. I do want to shout out the one special Patreon that's been with me since the very beginning, Pelig. Thank you so much, my man. If this video exists, it's also because of you and because of the support that you give me every single month. I couldn't thank you enough. I obviously have a lot more planned going forward. I will speak to you in the next episode of the Indie Diarist.